Hey guys, we're taking our time tonight. The world outside has already slowed down. Yellow squares are fading in the windows of high-rise buildings. Someone will still be flipping through the tape. Someone will be late for the last tram. And you are already lying down, feeling your body slowly becoming heavy. Silence and the echo of the day are mixed in the air, and it is time to surrender to philosophy that sounds like a lullaby, but let's be honest, you would probably never last. A whole night alone with your thoughts without any distraction. A person would simply crumble under the weight of their own ideas. That is why we are looking for the words of Plato, Seneca, or Buddha. They become soft pillows for the mind. So, before you settle down, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I am doing here. And I will be glad if you write in the comments where exactly you are listening to me now and what time it is. This will create our own night map of the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for a quiet background hum. And let's dive into today's journey together. You've noticed it, haven't you? How strange life is when you think about goals. People often sigh, I never got what I wanted. But the uncomfortable secret is, they often never even took aim. It's like staring at a dartboard, holding the dart in your hand, and then tossing it vaguely in the air, hoping gravity will do the rest. You might laugh, but that's how many of us treat our ambitions. You want happiness, success, love, but you don't dare to define the target, let alone step forward and take a shot. And of course, the dart hits the floor, and you mutter something about bad luck. This isn't just an armchair theory. Historians of war have pointed out how armies that lacked a clear objective, like Napoleon's men stumbling into Russia's endless winter, were doomed not only by the cold, but by the absence of a defined endgame. A soldier without a map is just a wanderer with a weapon, and you, lying here tonight, know the feeling, drifting through days as if tomorrow will kindly provide direction. Let's be real, sometimes you didn't aim, because aiming hurts. If you fix your gaze on something real, you also risk missing. Safer to pretend you never wanted it in the first place. It's the logic of the student who doesn't study and then shrugs. I didn't even try, because failure is easier to swallow when dressed up as indifference. You've done it too, haven't you? You call it cynicism, but it's really self-defense. The Greeks understood this centuries ago. Archery was sacred in their myths. Eros, the god of love, literally fires arrows to pierce hearts. The metaphor was obvious. Love requires risk. No arrow loosed, no hard one. Historians still argue whether archery was more symbolic than practical in Homeric tales, but the lesson remains, aim matters. You may find it funny to compare your life choices to a medieval archer standing in the cold, squinting across a battlefield, but the principle holds. In old chronicles, there's mention of English longbowmen at Agincourt, whose arrows fell like rain. They aimed at the French cavalry, and though many arrows missed, enough struck home to change history. A whole nation's destiny shifted because ordinary men lifted their bows and dared to shoot. Meanwhile, how many modern destinies remain stagnant because someone refused to raise the bow at all? Picture your own day. You wake up, scroll through messages, drift through work, answer emails, maybe make a half-hearted plan to get in shape someday, but no real aim. No bullseye marked. And so, the day slips by. It's like watching a candle burn and wondering why the room keeps getting darker. Here's the quirky bit. Monks in medieval monasteries sometimes practiced aiming exercises, not with bows, but with silence. They tried to focus on one prayer, one thought, for an extended time, as if shooting arrows into the chaos of their minds. Some scholars claim these rituals were as much about discipline as about God. And maybe that's the secret you're missing. You don't need divine intervention to justify taking aim. You just need the courage to choose one target, even if the world laughs. And yes, the world will laugh. People snicker when you say you want to start a business, write a novel, or learn Italian at 40. They say it's unrealistic. But here's the paradox. You won't hit if you don't shoot. but you won't even see the target if you don't admit it's there. Life is less about success in the Instagram sense, and more about becoming the kind of archer who can stand in the field, quiver shaking, and still draw the bow. Sometimes you've blamed fate. You said, well, I didn't get the job because the world is unfair. Maybe true. Maybe the world is tilted, like a dartboard hung crookedly in a smoky tavern. But even then, wouldn't it be better to throw? Better to at least test yourself against the tilt of the board than to slump at the table and sip bitterness. Think of explorers. The reason the age of discovery reshaped maps was not because the sailors knew exactly where they were going, but because they pointed their ships at something west, east, toward a whisper of land. Aim first, precision later. Columbus didn't reach India, but his misguided aim redrew the globe. In life, your India may be wrong too, but the act of sailing is what reveals the real continent. And what about you tonight, lying here in the half-dark? You might whisper, but I don't know what I want. Fine, then start smaller. Aim at waking up tomorrow without immediately grabbing your phone. Aim at cooking one proper meal instead of 3 snacks. Aim at something visible, tangible, worthy of the arrow loose today. Misses don't matter. Archers learn by shooting. So, let's be uncomfortably clear. People don't get what they want because they don't aim. They stay vague. They float. They dismiss targets as impossible or childish, and so they never string the bow. But what if you became the person who names the target, who risks the ridicule, who draws the string until it sings in your hand? What if you miss? Well, at least you're facing forward, bow in hand, instead of sulking in the tent. And as your eyelids grow heavier, let that image stay. The silent archer, standing alone in the dusk, the world watching but not caring, his eye fixed on the far shape in the distance. He may miss, but he has aimed, and in that act alone, he has already stepped beyond failure. You feel the mattress hold you like shallow water, soft pressure at the shoulders, the gentle hush of the fan making a small weather system above your head. Somewhere outside, a lake thus exhales and pulls away. Somewhere inside, your mind doesn't. It turns the day over and finds the rough edge, the message unanswered, the test result pending, the bill that pretends to be an email, and an anvil at the same time. Then your thoughts widen, and the hallway light of your worries opens into a dark cathedral. Wars, floods, diagnoses that arrive like wrong number calls from the universe. You don't need an imagination to see suffering. You just need to keep your eyes open 5 minutes. The uncomfortable arithmetic that existence is hard, not occasionally, but by design, like a road laid over hills without apology. People you love get sick. Plans you made with care are treated by chance like paper. Boats in a storm. History only confirms the pattern. During the Black Death of the 14th century, Europe likely lost around 1/3 of its population. Whole villages blinking off like candle flames in a draft. Historians still argue whether the true toll reached closer to half, depending on the region and the record keeper's honesty. What's certain is the atmosphere. Fear with a smell, bells with a schedule. And you, small in your room, ask the honest question: is there anything that makes this bearable, let alone worthwhile? It's not a question for a blog post. It's the question that sits on the edge of your bed like an older, wiser self, and waits for you to stop scrolling. You remember our archer from last time, the one trembling at dusk. Tonight, you see where the bow shakes, not just fear of missing, but the wind of history pressing from the other direction. The Stoics tried to answer your question without magic. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private notes, what we now call meditations, while running an empire troubled by border wars and plague. He reminded himself that pain is a sensation, opinion is optional, and duty is a path you can still walk even with stones in your shoe. Scholars still debate whether he intended those pages for anyone else or only for the version of himself prone to despair. Either way, it tells you something. Even emperors needed nighttime reminders to breathe. You've probably noticed the modern upgrades to ancient misery. We invented bureaucracy, which is arguably a test of patience designed by angels, who fell because they forgot to reply to one email like joke one. We added social media, which allows 10,000 strangers to crowd into your living room and rearrange your self-esteem without taking off their shoes. We attached notifications to our nervous systems like tin cans to a cat's tail. Now even silence rings, and when you finally reach for help, the universe's customer support puts you on hold with celestial flute music. Have you tried turning your life off and on again? Like joke 2, yet the same pattern appears across ages. Meaning seems to grow in soil that includes suffering. Think of nurses walking the fluorescent corridors at 4 a.m., attaching hope to machines. Think of firefighters tying their boots while smoke writes its fast, black story overhead. Think of parents rising for the 1,000th time to steady a feverish child, turning a living room into a ward with one cool cloth and a whispered song. There's no romance here, only the vague, undeniable brightness of presence doing its job. A strange, marginal detail from the past. In Victorian times, people wove mourning jewelry out of the hair of the deceased, bracelets, brooches, tiny braided memories carried at the wrist. Quirky, yes, but also a clue. Grief, when it can't be cured, asks to be kept. The act of weaving becomes a tiny loom of meaning, pulling some order through the disarray. You might not braid hair, but you keep the cup from the last good coffee. With a friend, the coat that still holds the echo of your grandfather's cologne, the library card of someone who taught you to love sentences. These are your wearable amulets, honest as thread. If suffering is given, the question becomes, what can redeem it? Not erase, redeem. You can feel the difference in your chest. Erasing would be convenient. Redemption is heavier but real. When you take up a burden on purpose, learn a difficult skill. Carry a responsibility others left on the floor, you notice something unusual. The weight doesn't disappear, but it stops being an accusation and becomes a role. You're no longer trapped by why me, but steadied by for this. It doesn't mean you catastrophize for sport. You still fix what can be fixed. You confirm the appointment, ask for the extension, text a friend before the 3 a.m. thought hardens into a belief. The medievals, confused about germs, carried poses to ward off bad air. Not effective medicine, but a charming reminder. People always try to do something. Your posy can be a plan on a page. A walk at noon, water, next to the bed. A boundary that turns no into the most hygienic word of the week. Notice how your body responds as you imagine this shift. The jaw loosens, the breath evens, the fan's small weather system becomes favorable. This is not denial. This is you choosing a pasture in the storm. Sailors do it all the time, trimming their lines so the same wind that could capsize them becomes forward motion. No sailor prays for a storm, but the sea doesn't take requests. What you can request is courage's old companion, responsibility. And on the evenings, when none of this seems elegant, when the deep philosophy looks like you, in slippers, paying a bill 5 minutes before the penalty, remember how low meaning hides. You can rescue one thing from the day's rubble: the neatly folded shirt, the apology typed and sent, the gentle parentheses you put around your own anger so it doesn't breed. You can aim at being decent when heroic is out of reach. Decent. People keep the world from rusting through. If you're tempted to say, well, others have it worse, so my pain doesn't count, try a kinder thought. You don't honor the suffering of others by refusing to learn from your own. Think of the hospital volunteer who rolls a tea trolley down corridors, small sweetnesses on wheels, because no one survives on saline alone. You can be that to yourself. Pour a cup of ordinary kindness, let the steam touch your face, and remember you've made it through every bad day so far, which is a strange, undeniable statistic in your favor. And when it all breaks through again, the news alert, the memory you didn't invite, let it cry if you must. The pillow knows what to do. Then, as the tremor passes, let one simple sentence step forward like a friend who doesn't need to knock. There is something I can do next. Not everything. Next, a message. A glass of water. The lights off at a merciful hour. You don't conquer the mountain. You persuade it. One quiet switchback at a time, like joke 3. Switchback is just a mountain's way of saying, fine. Have it your way slowly. Somewhere in this you feel the silver thread. The possibility that meaning is not the opposite of suffering but its counterweight. Your ancestors suspected as much, even when they didn't have our vocabulary. They built cathedrals and clinics, wrote hymns and handbooks, planted trees they would never sit under. They trusted that the world, if met with the right kind of courage, would answer back not by removing pain, but by inviting transformation. So breathe. Let the room be a room again. Listen to the fan, the small weather over your bed. You're not promised an easy voyage, only a worthy one. And tonight, that might begin with nothing grander than sleep, a rehearsal for surrender that teaches your body trust. When you wake, we'll take another step. For now, the darkness is only a soft curtain, and you're allowed to rest behind it. The night folds around you, heavy but calm, and you wonder about that peculiar word values. Not prices, not discounts on a clearance rack, but the compass needles that point your heart through the fog. You've heard the theories, maybe in class, maybe in a late-night argument over takeout. Are values something you invent, like new apps and awkward TikTok dances? Or are they fossils you uncover, already embedded in the bedrock of the psyche? A few centuries back, Friedrich Nietzsche declared, with the theatrical flair of someone dropping a mic before microphones existed, that God was dead. He didn't mean a literal obituary, but that the cultural backbone of belief had fractured. Without that scaffolding, he warned, people would drift, hollowed out, unless they became bold enough to create their own values. Imagine it, each person a blacksmith in a moral forge, hammering new ideals on an anvil made of willpower. Exciting, terrifying, exhausting. Across the timeline, Carl Jung shook his head metaphorically, since they never met in a debating hall. Jung suggested that values aren't invented like gadgets. They already breathe inside you, curled in your subconscious, like hibernating bears. Myths, dreams, and archetypes were his excavation tools. Dig deep enough and you'll find truths older than language. Historians still argue whether Jung's theory was psychology, mysticism, or a creative mixture that smelled suspiciously of both. But for you, lying here tonight, the argument is less academic and more intimate. Are you supposed to build yourself from scratch, or to uncover the blueprints already humming in your bones? It's like standing in a thrift shop. Nietzsche would hand you a sewing kit. Make your own coat. Jung would say, try on the dusty one at the back, it was stitched for you centuries ago. And you, caught between, don't want to freeze in the cold, but aren't sure whether your coat should be neon new or ancient. Will take comfort in the fact that whole civilizations wrestled with the same problem. After the Roman Empire crumbled, medieval Europe tried to rebuild values from the rubble. Some clung to strict religious structures, others experimented with new communal laws. A quirky footnote: in the 12th century, towns in northern Italy actually drew up moral codes about how many times a week citizens were expected to bathe, because cleanliness wasn't just hygiene, it was virtue in action. Today you groan about showering before Zoom, but once upon a time, it was practically a holy deed. You might laugh, but your own choices echo the same tug of war. Should you invent yourself, endlessly reinvent, rebrand, redo, or should you pause, breathe, and admit that some part of you has already decided what matters? Look at your habits when nobody is watching. That twitch to comfort a crying child, that sigh when you see litter on the sidewalk, this instinct to send the "are you home safe" text. You didn't calculate those. They erupted from somewhere older than strategy. Jung would nod. Still, there's something electrifying about Nietzsche's dare. To create values is to declare, I will not be a passive passenger. It's the philosophy of startups and revolutions. It's the voice that says, why not abolish the monarchy? Or why not design a car that runs on batteries? The risk, of course, is chaos. Without any reference points, your homemade moral compass might point north today, south tomorrow, and eventually spin so fast it drills a hole in the floor. So how do you balance it? Perhaps by treating invention and discovery as dance partners. You invent how to express the values, but you discover the root beneath. Like music, you don't invent the physics of sound, but you invent the song. A violin obeys strings and resonance, but what pours out can be Bach or bluegrass. Likewise, compassion may be a built-in archetype, but whether you show it through volunteering, parenting, or simply not honking at 2 a.m. is up to you. Remember that funny sunscreen from history: crocodile dung smeared by ancient Egyptians. Think of this debate in the same way. People were already discovering that shade and salves mattered. They didn't invent the sun's cruelty, but they invented the methods, sometimes absurd, sometimes ingenious, to cope with it. Values are the same. The sun of human experience burns, whether you admit it or not. Your lotion can be Nietzschean, invention, or Jungian discovery, but you'd better rub something on or you'll crisp. Here's where the scholar's whisper becomes your lullaby. You don't need to resolve the whole argument tonight. The room doesn't demand a thesis, it asks for honesty. Are there moments today when you ignored the tug of something that felt like conscience? Were there times you pretended not to care because caring made you look naive? And did you also dream, in a secret corner, of creating a brand new version of yourself, sleek as a fresh username? Both instincts tell you something. Both point toward the possibility that life is not either invention or discovery, but a collage of both. And as you drift closer to sleep, think of yourself as a cartographer under starlight. Nietzsche hands you a blank map and says, draw boldly. Jung hands you a faint, ancient outline and says, trace carefully. The truth might be that your map will only become legible as you walk it, step by step, mistakes and all. Your eyelids fall heavier now. Let the debate fade into background hum. Tomorrow, perhaps, you'll invent something new, a line of poetry, a boundary at work, a plan for the week. Tomorrow, too, you might discover something old, the satisfaction of honesty, the pull of kindness, the ancient calm of making tea while rain falls on the roof. Tonight, you can rest knowing you're allowed to be both the inventor and the archaeologist of your life. The fan is still whispering, the room is a gentle cave, and your thoughts shift to the burden of responsibility. Not the kind your manager emails about in bullet points, but the kind that hums under the skin, the weight you either pick up or dodge. It's the crossroads, where you stand as an individual, or melt into the warm fog of the collective, safe but invisible. You've seen both options play out. Maybe in school, where group projects meant 3 people carried the weight, while 2 floated like decorative clouds, or in workplaces, where entire departments hide behind slogans about team effort, even though you can name the one person who actually kept the whole ship afloat. Responsibility is rarely evenly distributed. It migrates to whoever dares to say, fine, I'll do it. And the irony, that person, groaning under the weight, often grows stronger, while the floaters remain thin as paper. Therapists have long wrestled with this balance. A good therapist doesn't fix your life like a mechanic swapping spark plugs. They sit across from you, tilt their head, and ask the kind of question that makes your silence feel loud. The point isn't that they know your solution, but that they believe you already do, or at least that you can. It's infuriating, like someone refusing to carry your grocery bags even though they clearly have free hands. But the truth is, if they always carried them, you'd never build the muscle. History is littered with examples of what happens when responsibility is outsourced to the group. Think of the Soviet experiment with collectivized farms. In theory, everyone worked together, equally. In practice, grain rotted in warehouses while villagers starved, because no one felt ownership. When the harvest belonged to everyone, it belonged to no one. Scholars still debate whether it was ideology, corruption, or sheer logistical disaster that doomed the project. But the lesson is sharp when no individual can say, "This is my field, my duty." The land itself withers. Now, that doesn't mean you're meant to be a lone wolf chewing leather in the wilderness. Humans are social creatures. We need collectives, families, cities, even your group chat where memes count as moral support. But there's a line between sharing burdens and dissolving into blame games. You've probably heard someone sigh, "Society should fix this." And yes, society should. But society is just a plural of you. If everyone waits, the repair vanishes into the fog. There's a quirky historical footnote about ancient Rome. When aqueducts needed maintenance, citizens were sometimes required to donate labor days. It wasn't glamorous, hauling stone and clearing moss, but it kept the water flowing. The genius wasn't in the collective itself, it was in making sure each individual had a defined share. Everyone knew which section of aqueduct was their problem. You can almost picture it, toga hitched up, sandals slipping, muttering Latin curses at algae. Yet the city survived, because people didn't outsource responsibility to an abstract they. You, lying here in your soft, modern cave, face a smaller version of the same. Do you treat your life as someone else's problem? Do you sigh at dishes in the sink, imagining some invisible committee of elves should appear at midnight? Or do you accept the brutal, almost funny fact, if you don't, nobody will? Light joke one, your fridge is not unionized, so if the milk goes bad, it won't file a complaint, it'll just quietly murder your coffee. Personal responsibility is uncomfortable because it exposes you. You can't hide behind the fog of the group. If you say, "I'll handle it," and then fail, the target is painted right on your chest. But the paradox is that only by stepping into that spotlight do you grow. Think of soldiers awarded medals, not for surviving, but for acting when everyone else froze. Think of the anonymous volunteers who, during the 1918 flu, drove wagons of bodies because nobody else would. They carried horror, yes, but they also carved themselves into history. Responsibility is also contagious. Take one small piece, and others notice. Parents who own their mistakes often raise kids who admit theirs. Managers who roll up their sleeves inspire teams that stop whining. And friends who text first without keeping score remind you that generosity doesn't require a spreadsheet. The collective becomes healthier when its individuals stop waiting to be rescued. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from before. Imagine if the whole village just shrug, "Somebody else will handle the sun." Spoiler, everyone gets crispy. Responsibility works the same way. If you assume someone else will carry it, the burn spreads. But if you carry a corner, even just your own corner, the tent holds. Sometimes responsibility is frightening because it feels infinite. If you claim one burden, do you have to claim them all? Relax, you're not required to fix the universe. You're required to fix what's within your reach, your words, your promises, your dishes, your debts. And sometimes, paradoxically, responsibility also means saying no. Carrying everything breaks you just as surely as carrying nothing shrinks you. And yes, the collective has its allure. It promises, "Don't worry, we'll decide for you." But when the collective chooses, it rarely chooses your dream. It chooses safety, average, mediocrity. You vanish into the herd and wonder why. You feel invisible. Better to stumble under your own chosen weight than glide in a fog of borrowed excuses. Light joke 2. Waiting for the collective to fix your problems is like standing in line at a DMV run by sluts. It might happen, but not before your reincarnation. Paperwork is due. So, what can you do? Right here in your dim-lit room, blanket pulled up. You can whisper a quiet vow. "This one is mine." Doesn't matter if this one is a sink full of dishes, a half-written application, or finally, calling the dentist. That vow, silly and small, pulls you out of fog. Responsibility is GPS for the soul. One last quirky detail. In medieval guilds, Apprentices sometimes signed contracts written in their own blood. Dramatic, yes, but symbolic. Responsibility wasn't abstract. It was physical. You don't need a quill and a knife, just a willingness to bleed metaphorically, to stake your pride on something you won't abandon at the first stumble. And as your eyelids drop lower, let the question hover: which part of tomorrow will you quietly declare as yours? Don't hand it to the fork. Don't outsource it today. Pick it up. Carry it. Even if it's heavy, it will fit the curve of your shoulders better than you think. Light joke 3. At worst, you'll end up with strong shoulders, which is cheaper than a gym membership. Now drift. Tomorrow you can lift something real. Tonight, you can practice by lifting only your breath in and out. Steady, steady, like responsibility's lullaby. The room hums softly, and your body sinks deeper into the mattress. You've just been thinking about responsibility, about choosing your burdens rather than outsourcing them, and now the thought sharpens into something older, heavier, the simple truth that no matter what you choose, you are never fighting only one opponent. There are always at least 3. The first enemy is nature. She looks gentle tonight, the moon outside. The fan breeze indoors, but don't be fooled. Nature has no concern for your feelings. She brings frost in April, hurricanes in September, pollen in your throat every spring like a cruel inside joke. In 1815, a volcano called Tambora erupted in Indonesia, blasting so much ash into the atmosphere that the following year was remembered as the year without a summer. Crops failed across Europe and North America. Skies turned strange colors. Famine followed. Historians still debate the exact death toll, but millions were affected. And there you are, sighing about the weather app being off by 3 degrees. Nature is the first enemy, impartial, untamed, indifferent. The second enemy is society. You need it, you can't live without it, but it shapes you with pressure as subtle as it is relentless. Laws, norms, fashion trends, office politics, society, demands. Be useful, be polite, be predictable. It hands you report cards, performance reviews, and subtle eyebrow raises from strangers who disapprove of your socks. Sometimes society keeps you safe, traffic lights save your life daily. Sometimes it suffocates, try expressing an unpopular opinion at Thanksgiving and watch the room frost over. One quirky fact: in the 18th century, powdered wigs were such a social necessity among elites that failing to wear one could bar you from court appearances. Imagine being judged not by the sharpness of your arguments, but by the fluffiness of your headgear. Yet even today, your resume might be skimmed or skipped, depending on the invisible wig of networking. And then there is the third enemy, human malice, not abstract, not structural, personal. The sharp word from someone who knows exactly where your insecurities live. The betrayal from a friend who swore loyalty. The cruelty that delights in making you stumble. Sometimes it's dramatic, sometimes petty. Light joke 1. You know the colleague who accidentally hits reply all just to make you look foolish. That's malice with a Wi-Fi signal. These 3 forces: nature, society, malice don't take turns. They stack. A storm floods. The city, your employer cuts hours, and a neighbor mutters gossip all in the same month. Life doesn't cue its difficulties politely. It plays them in chorus. You've felt that discordant music in your chest, a sense that the universe has its boot on your neck. The question isn't whether you'll meet these enemies. You already have. The question is whether you let their inevitability excuse your surrender. Too often, you shrug. Well, nature hates me. Society ignores me. People hurt me, so why bother? That's like a sailor refusing to sail because the sea is salty, or a musician refusing to play because instruments go out of tune. The hardship is built into the medium. You live in an arena, not a spa. History offers countless reminders. During the Blitz in London, citizens faced all 3 enemies at once. Nature brought bitter winters, society enforced rationing and blackouts, and malice arrived nightly in the form of bombs. Yet people kept diaries, brewed weak tea, played pianos in basements, while glass rained from rooftops. Scholars still argue whether morale was truly as high as propaganda claimed. But the fact remains, life continued under attack, not because the enemies were absent, but because they were defied. Think of your own daily skirmishes. You wake to allergies, nature. Drag yourself to a workplace that resents innovation society, and receive a passive-aggressive text from someone you once trusted malice. Small battles, yes, but battles you can either crawl back under the blanket or acknowledge. This is the terrain of existence. Better to armor up. Armor doesn't mean cynicism. It doesn't mean expecting betrayal at every corner or carrying an umbrella indoors. It means preparing for difficulty as normal, not catastrophic. Roman soldiers used to carry a day's ration of dried wheat cakes even on short marches. They assumed adversity, so they packed accordingly. Your version might be keeping a sense of humor in your pocket, or a playlist that reminds you you're not made of glass. Light joke too. Though unlike Roman soldiers, your emergency ration is probably a suspicious granola bar in the bottom of your bag, so old it could qualify as an archaeological artifact. And yes, sometimes the malice is your own, that whisper in your mind that says, "You're worthless, why try?" It's unnerving to realize you can be your own third enemy, mocking yourself in a voice trained by years of criticism. Society may have taught you the lines, but you've learned to recite them with flair. Part of responsibility is noticing that, interrupting it, and saying, "Not today." But here's the twist that soothes you as you sink into the pillow. The three enemies are also the three teachers. Nature teaches humility you, not the planet's landlord, but its tenant. Society teaches discipline without rules, traffic lights, and taxes. Chaos would swallow the streets. And malice, though cruel, teaches discernment. Who deserves your trust, how to draw boundaries, when to walk away. Remember our archer. Tonight you picture them facing not just the target, but a stormy sky, a jury of gossips, and a rival laughing from the shadows. The arrow still flies, perhaps it wobbles, perhaps it falls short, but it cuts the air anyway, and you, too, must fire in spite of the chorus, not in absence of it. Light joke 3. Imagine explaining to a medieval peasant that your battle today was a slow Wi-Fi signal. They'd probably pat your head and offer you their only potato, which feels like a polite way of saying, "Bless your fragile heart," so exhale. Feel the mattress hold you steady. The three enemies aren't leaving. They're waiting outside the door tomorrow, the day after, and the day after that. But that doesn't make your fight meaningless. It makes it human. Everyone who ever lived stood where you stand, under the same weather, under the same pressure, facing the same malice, and many still aimed, still fought, still sang. Close your eyes now. Let the thought settle like a blanket. You are not the first to wrestle these forces, and you will not be the last. Tomorrow you will step back into the arena. Tonight, you can let the fan mimic the sea, steady, endless, unconcerned, and drift into the rest that even warriors are allowed. The room is dim, and you're drowsy enough that your thoughts slip into images without asking permission. You see a tent, its fabric weathered and sagging, lit by the amber glow of a fire outside. An old man sits inside, surrounded by the familiar clutter of his life tools, rugs, pots, the smell of smoke baked into every fiber. He's 80 years old, settled in habit the way stones settle in a riverbed. And then a voice calls him out, "Abraham, leave, step into the unknown." You blink, lying there in your bed, and feel the absurdity of it. At 80, you'd think a man has earned the right to slippers and predictability. Instead, the story says, he's called into catastrophe. He leaves the tent, follows a path he doesn't see, and what follows is not comfort, but chaos, famine, war, betrayal, near sacrifice of his own son. If you expected a cheerful travel diary, this is not it. Adventure. Here is not a reward. It's responsibility in a costume of calamity. It's tempting to dismiss such stories as myth, but pause. Think of explorers Magellan, Shackleton, Earhart. Each one left the safety of the tent, and each one met disaster before they met destiny. Shackleton's ship, Endurance, was crushed by Antarctic ice in 1915. He and his crew camped on drifting floes, then rowed across frigid seas in open boats. Historians still argue whether Shackleton was reckless or heroic, but what they don't dispute is this: he carried his men through disaster, not around it. The promise of glory collapsed into the weight of responsibility, and he bore it. That's the heartbeat of Abraham's story. The call doesn't lead to vacation postcards. It leads to suffering that demands endurance, choices that demand courage. It whispers the uncomfortable truth you already sense in your chest. The adventure worth living is not about happiness, but about shouldering something so heavy it shapes you. And here you are, maybe younger than Abraham, maybe older, but with your own tent of routines, your morning coffee, your predictable commute, your safe excuses. What would it mean to leave that tent? Not to run away, but to step into a purpose that guarantees trouble as much as triumph. The thought makes you smile nervously, like imagining a roller coaster while still strapped into your safe couch. There's a quirky medieval note that fits here. Pilgrims traveling to Santiago de Compostela in Spain would carry scallop shells on their hats as proof of their journey. The shell was both badge and burden. It said, "I left the tent." It also meant blisters, hunger, and sometimes bandits. The shell didn't protect them, it reminded them that suffering was part of the package. Maybe your shell is a diploma on the wall, or a wedding ring, or the stubborn folder labeled novel draft. It doesn't guarantee happiness, but it declares you stepped out. Light joke one, though, to be fair, your adventure might currently look like finally calling your internet provider, which feels less like Abraham's saga and more like a small book of lamentations on hold music. The thing is, the call never promises clarity. Abraham didn't get a brochure, neither did you. You thought university, marriage, parenthood, career, all of it would come with crisp instruction manuals. Instead you got cryptic hints, contradictory advice, and a lot of moments where the map felt upside down. That's normal. Adventure is not a neat staircase, but a path carved while you walk. And yet, look at the alternative. Stay in the tent, never answer the call. Keep your life wrapped in plastic. Safe, yes, but sterile? You know people who chose this. They never risked rejection, never pursued the scary dream, never lifted a responsibility that wasn't handed to them. They avoided catastrophe, but also transformation. Their tent became their tomb. So maybe the question isn't, will I suffer if I step out? That's guaranteed. The better question is, will the suffering shape me or shrink me? Abraham's story, Shackleton's voyage, even the pilgrim with blisters, they all show the same paradox. Disaster endured with purpose becomes identity. Light joke 2. Not that you need to reenact Shackleton's march or local gym treadmill. It's quite enough icy misery for one lifetime. And you know this already, in smaller doses. You left the tent when you took that job you weren't ready for, when you raised your hand in class, when you confessed your feelings knowing rejection was possible. Each time, catastrophe hovered, and sometimes it bit, but each time, too, you grew. It's worth remembering that in ancient storytelling, the call to adventure almost always looks ridiculous at first. Odysseus leaves home for a quick war that lasts 20 years. Frodo in Tolkien's tale just wanted to garden, not march into Mordor. Abraham just wanted to retire in peace, not become the father of nations. The call is absurd because it interrupts comfort, but absurdity is how transformation announces itself. Think of your life now. What is calling you out of the tent? Is it that voice telling you to finally confront a habit? The whisper that says it's time to move cities? The nagging reminder that the project in your drawer is either born or buried? It won't promise happiness. It will promise difficulty. But difficulty with purpose is strangely lighter than comfort. Without it. Light joke 3. Besides, staying in the tent too long just means more time folding laundry, which philosophers agree is the least transcendent of all human activities. So breathe. Let the mattress hold you as Abraham's tent once held him. Feel the pull of the unknown, not as a threat, but as a reminder that adventure, catastrophe, and responsibility are braided together. Tomorrow, you may not cross deserts or seas, but you will face the smaller callings of your day. And if you step forward, even a little, you honor that old man under the stars who left everything safe behind. Now close your eyes. Imagine the fabric of your own tent fluttering, the fire crackling outside, the stars indifferent but steady. The call may not be loud, but it's there. And even in your sleep, you can whisper, "I will answer." The night feels thick now, almost like velvet draped over your shoulders, and you can sense how the story has been tightening. Abraham in his tent, you leaving yours. But once you step out, the road does not suddenly flatten into a straight, sunlit highway. It turns jagged. The ground tilts. And here is the truth you try to avoid, whispering even to yourself. Difficulty is not the exception. It is the fabric. Hardship is not punishment. It is destiny's gymnasium. And you are already enrolled. You've seen this in your own days. The moments that built you were never the ones that felt easy. The failed exam that forced you to study differently. The heartbreak that rewired your sense of love and boundaries. The project that collapsed and forced you to discover resilience instead of applause. It's not pleasant to remember, but you can feel it in your chest. You are heavier now, denser, because of difficulty, not despite it. History shouts the same reminder. In 490 BC, the Greeks faced the Persians at Marathon, outnumbered, exhausted. They fought anyway, and their unexpected victory became a symbol of courage that still echoes in every marathon runner panting through the final mile. Historians still argue whether the story of the lone soldier running 26 miles to announce the victory is fact or legend, but the myth itself matters. Difficulty forged identity, and identity became inspiration. You don't tell bedtime stories about people who lounged and challenged. You tell them about people who bled uphill and didn't quit. There's a quirky detail about samurai training in medieval Japan. Young warriors were sometimes instructed to deliberately carry heavy buckets of water up steep hills, not because anyone needed the water at the top, but because the exercise itself hardened the legs and the will. The water was irrelevant. The burden was the point. You, too, carry buckets, everyday emails, bills, chores. They seem pointless, but they're strengthening muscles you don't notice until the crisis comes and suddenly you can stand when others fold. Light joke 1. Though admittedly, carrying a bucket of laundry up your apartment stairs does not feel especially samurai, unless you grunt dramatically and whisper, "For honor." Halfway through. Psychology has picked up where samurai drills left off. Exposure therapy teaches anxious people to face small doses of the thing they fear: a spider in a jar, a short elevator ride, a phone call to a stranger. The idea is simple. Only by confronting the monster do you learn that you are not as fragile as your panic insists. Each confrontation thickens the armor. Each avoided confrontation keeps you brittle. You know this pattern in your own bones, but hardship is more than training. It is destiny. Life will hand you difficulty, whether you enroll or not. Bodies weaken. Jobs vanish. Relationships strain. You can curse the curriculum, but you cannot drop the class. The only choice is whether to attend willingly. A sailor doesn't choose the storm, but he chooses to tie the knots and hold the rudder. Light joke 2. And if he doesn't, he chooses to become a cautionary tale told in pub songs, which is not the legacy you're aiming for. It's tempting, of course, to chase ease, to wish for a life padded like a nursery with no sharp corners. And for brief moments, ease arrives: a smooth week, a paycheck, a soft morning. But notice how quickly boredom follows. Comfort without challenge tastes like candy floss, sweet, insubstantial, dissolving before you even swallow. Difficulty, meanwhile, is bread dense, sometimes dry, but it sustains. Think back to the hardest chapter of your life. You didn't want it. You wouldn't wish it again. But can you deny what it carved into you? The patience you earned, the empathy you carry now for others in the same storm. That is destiny disguised as disaster. The Greeks would have called it fate. Modern psychology calls it post-traumatic growth. Different labels, same reality. You were stronger than you would have been without the wound. And yet, here is the paradox you need to hold softly as your eyelids lower. You don't have to go hunting for catastrophe. Life supplies plenty. Your job is not to chase pain, but to stop running when it finds you, to let the weight sit on your shoulders until your bones discover they were denser than they thought. A strange marginal fact. Lobsters grow by molting, shedding their rigid shells when they become too small. In that interim, they are soft, exposed, easy prey. But if they didn't endure that vulnerable stage, they would never grow at all. Your own growth works the same way. Difficulty strips you, leaves you exposed, makes you hate the mirror. And yet, that is the stage when expansion happens. Like joke 3. Just be grateful your molting doesn't involve scuttling around the ocean naked until your new shell grows though. Arguably, that's what your teenage years felt like. So, as you lie here, let the thought sink in. Difficulty is not your enemy. It is the drill sergeant you resent, but later thank. It is the sculptor chiseling the shape you never would have chosen, but secretly admire. It is destiny's way of saying, you are not done yet. Tomorrow will bring its share small annoyances, maybe large griefs. You can curse them, or you can breathe and say, "Oh, the weights in my gym have arrived." You don't have to smile while lifting. You just have to lift. Now close your eyes. Let the velvet night wrap tighter. Somewhere in the dark, samurai carry their buckets. Lobsters molt. Marathon runners stumble forward. You are among them, part of the same strange fraternity of creatures strengthened by hardship. Sleep is your rest between sets, dream, and wake ready to carry again. You lie very still and lower your gaze inward, as if the mind had a trapdoor under the pillow. It opens on a quiet drop, and there it is, the dark place you've tried not to visit. Call it the abyss if you like, though tonight it looks less like a cliff and more like a deep, slow ocean where sounds arrive late and meanings echo for a long time. You used to think the abyss was pure menace, a black screensaver for despair. But something else breathes down there, old and watchful, like a lighthouse that learned patience. Stories have always sent you into this water. A young hero dives into the belly of a beast to rescue a dead father, not always biologically dead, but absent, lost, swallowed by the chaos that eats names and lineages. You remember the wooden boy and the whale, Pinocchio kicking through salt and darkness to find Geppetto in the living cave of a giant throat. It's one of those scenes that sticks like a burr to the imagination because it tells a truth you recognize without having to vote on it. To become real, you swim through fear and you bring something back. The ancients understood the civic version of this. In Rome, noble families kept wax death masks, images of their ancestors in cabinets, then wore or carried them in funeral processions, so the whole line marched with the living. That's a historical fact you can picture. Lamplight on wax features a reminder that your face is not only yours. When you stare into the dark long enough, you don't just meet monsters. You also meet the people who kept you from being devoured by them. They stand behind you in a long corridor of patience and say, very gently, "We survived." Borrow our spine. You hesitate, because staring into what frightens you sounds like a therapist's idea of fun. Light joke 1. It's as if the abyss needs better interior design, maybe a lamp, maybe a rug, perhaps a sign that says breathe, you're doing great. But you've noticed the practical magic of exposure. The first time you speak a hard truth aloud, your voice shakes. The 5th time, you can hear your own steadiness. The first day you walk back into the building where the bad memory lives, the hallway tilts. The 10th day, it's just a hallway again. Courage isn't the absence of shaking, it's the companion that keeps walking. While you shake dots, sometimes the thing you rescue down there really is a father. His discipline, his humor, his way of fixing what breaks without composing an essay about it. Sometimes it's a mother, her severe kindness, her fierce boundaries, her ability to fold chaos into dinner. Sometimes the parent is metaphor, your cultural lineage, the craft you abandoned, the principle you mocked because it was easier to be clever than faithful. The monster's belly, embarrassingly, is often your own avoidance procrastination. With teeth, light joke too. If your inner dragon had a smartphone, its favorite app would be just 5 more minutes. To help yourself descend without drowning, you can borrow odd tools from history's pocket. In Gothic cathedrals like Chartres, a stone labyrinth is set into the floor, a single winding path. You walk in slow circles that eventually arrive at the center. Pilgrims used it as a miniature pilgrimage when war or poverty kept them from the road. It's quirky and practical. You meet the abyss by walking it in a church, in your socks, at 1 mile per hour. You can do a version of that at home, circling your room, naming the fear in each corner, breathing until it's just a corner again. You might worry that the abyss is full of dragons, and some old maps certainly seem to think so. Historians still argue whether medieval cartographers really labeled unknown seas with "here be dragons," or whether that's a later myth that stuck because it feels right. Either way, the metaphor is faithful. We draw monsters at the edge of what we know, but edges move when you stand on them. The subtraction of fear is slow math. Look how your body responds to the idea of retrieval other than defeat. The same darkness that made your chest tight now feels like a hallway to a storage room. There, on a high shelf, sits a toolbox with your family name scratched on the lid. Maybe it holds stubbornness, the good kind, the refusal to quit when your knees click. Maybe it holds reverence, the decision to keep a promise when nobody is checking. Maybe it's a story you only half remember, the grandparent who crossed a border with one suitcase, the aunt who went back to school at 50, the neighbor who taught you to change a tire in the rain and made you laugh at the sky. Take what you need, return what you don't. The abyss is also an archive, a marginal reminder from earlier nights. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen. People did questionable things to face an implacable sun. Facing your internal weather won't require anything so fragrant. Just honesty and rhythm. 10 minutes of looking at the thing you're tempted to rename. 10 minutes of letting it be exactly what it is, not upgraded into catastrophe, not downsized into a joke, even though we do love a joke around here. 10 minutes of silence where your breath plays metronome and the abyss becomes a room with excellent acoustics. If you listen long enough, you start to hear what Jung insisted on, patterns older than your biography. Dreams that repeat, not because your brain is lazy, but because your soul is systematic. You stand in a river of images where others have stood, wells and caves, forests and stairwells, doors that won't open until you find the key inside your own pocket. Scholars can wrangle over categories, psychology or myth, neurology or spirit, but in the quiet, usefulness is the only test. If the image helps you walk through tomorrow with a straighter back, it belongs. There's a soft joke 3 floating up now. If you do meet your symbolic father in the belly of the beast, ask if he can also fix the leaky tap when you get home. No reason to waste a rescue, a purely abstract benefits. You are not trying to become fearless. That's an adolescent fantasy with good hair. You are trying to become resourced. That way, when nature shrugs, society frowns, and malice smirks as we talked about, you can say, "I've been to the storeroom." The voice that comes up from the depth is not flashy. It doesn't promise you'll win, only that you can endure without becoming mean. That voice has calluses and a very dry sense of humor. It remembers ration books, blackout curtains, thin soups that still warmed hands. It says, "Keep going." We did, Before sleep takes you, let's tidy the perception. The abyss is not a hole waiting to swallow you. It is a threshold waiting to watch you cross. You step down, find the lost ancestor, the competence you dropped, the courage you mislaid, tuck it under your arm, and climb back up, above, the room you know returns. Fan hum, window glow, the ordinary mercy of blankets. You brought something with you. It's small and heavy and real. Tomorrow, when the day tests you in its favorite petty ways, you'll feel that weight in your pocket. Touch it. Remember the cabinet of wax faces, the labyrinth stones, the whale's rib cage like an organ's, pipes, your lineage hums when you listen. And now that you've heard it, the dark is quieter, almost companionable. Close the trapdoor, pull the covers, you have been down and back. That's enough adventure for one night. You are lying here, half adrift, when a quiet suspicion rises. The world you see is not exactly the world. It is the one assembled around your aim. It's as if your eyes are projectors and the real is the goal you secretly or not so secretly carry. If you aim at nothing, the projection blurs. If you aim at money, every room turns into a market. If you aim at kindness, even a crowded bus smells faintly of sanctuary. The target you pick doesn't just direct your arrow. It bends the entire landscape, but history has already noticed this trick. In the early 17th century, Galileo pointed his telescope at the sky, expecting to see perfection, the crystalline spheres described by tradition. Instead, he saw moons around Jupiter, craters on our moon, roughness where there should have been purity. His aim, understanding the heavens, reshaped not just astronomy, but theology, philosophy, everything. Historians still argue whether Galileo was naive in how openly he challenged the church. But what's undeniable is how his aim configured the cosmos itself for those who came after. Point your lens differently, and the stars themselves rearrange. You know the same phenomenon in miniature. Aim at finding faults in someone, and by dinner time, they look like a catalogue of flaws. Aim at gratitude, and suddenly the same day shines. With tiny mercies, the barista spelling your name almost correctly, the crosswalk light switching in your favor. The events didn't change, your sightline did. Your target trained your eyes to select light joke one. It's why when you really want a new car, you start seeing that exact model on every street, as if the universe turned into a showroom just to taunt your bank account. Society trains collective aim. 2. During the Cold War, nations aimed at fear of nuclear annihilation, and so the world was saturated with fallout shelters, school drills, and movies where aliens looked suspiciously like rival superpowers. In contrast, when Renaissance Florence aimed at beauty, marble turned into Michelangelo's David, and chapels became canvases for light and paint. What you set your sights on, individually or together, is what populates the air you breathe. Quirky historical note. In medieval bestiaries, artists drew elephants with knees that bent backward like flamingos. Why? Because they had aimed their imagination at symbolism, not zoology. The elephant wasn't an elephant. It was a moral lesson lumbering across parchment. The distortion wasn't a mistake. It was accuracy relative to their chosen target. Your perception works the same way your elephants bend depending on whether you are aiming at status, comfort, or truth. The risk, of course, is MIS aiming. Pick the wrong bullseye, and the world warps grotesquely around it. Aim only at money, and soon friendships look like transactions. Aim only at power, and people become pawns. Aim at comfort, and even noble struggles seem like inconveniences. The archer's danger is not missing the shot, but mistaking the target. Better a miss at a worthy goal than a bullseye on emptiness. Light joke 2. Hitting the center of the wrong dartboard is basically the story of every toddler who proudly draws on the wall instead of the coloring book. Great aim, poor placement, and yet the reverse is beautiful. Aim at something true honor, compassion, wisdom, and the mess of daily life begins to crystallize. Tasks align, chaos reduces, even suffering reorganizes. not disappearing but bending into narrative. Think of monks who aimed at contemplation. The same silence that would have driven others mad became, for them, music. You've seen hints of this in your own life. When you aimed at finishing a degree, the city rearranged itself into libraries, coffee shops, late-night study corners. When you aimed at recovering from heartbreak, the same city rearranged into places of solace parks, songs, benches where the air felt softer. The bricks didn't move, your aim lit them differently. Here's a quirky fact to pocket before sleep. In the 18th century, sailors navigating by stars often carried a backstaff, an instrument designed to measure the sun's altitude without staring directly at it. They aimed not by looking at the blinding source, but by the shadow it cast. You might laugh, but it's a metaphor in disguise. Sometimes you can't stare at your ultimate goal directly, it's too dazzling, too abstract. Instead, you aim by shadows, by the little daily practices that align you without frying your retinas. Like joke 3. Although you could argue your phone already fries your retinas every night. So maybe sailors had the better idea. So ask yourself, gently, as sleep folds its hands over your eyes, what is your world currently configured around? What dartboard are you staring at? If it feels ugly, twisted, despairing, maybe the problem is not the world, but your chosen bullseye. The good news is that eyes, like lenses, can be refocused. Let yourself breathe. Imagine your bow raised again, but this time, before you release, notice not just the arrow, but the terrain shifting behind it. The world will bend to the target you mark. Choose carefully, aim steadily. And as your lids drift closed, let tomorrow's light be drawn toward a goal that makes even failure look like progress. The air is quiet except for the steady drone of the fan, and your mind wanders to the notion of an ideal some version of yourself that glimmers on the horizon like a mirage. You don't see it clearly, that you feel its pull. Every action, even the careless ones, seems to be measured against that silhouette. And in the middle of this strange measuring system is conscience. You're in a compass, the little red notification bubble that never lets you fully mute your life. You know the sensation. You snap at someone, and later the memory pricks you like a burr under your shirt. You ignore a task, and the silence of the undone thing buzzes louder than any alarm. That's conscience, a reminder that you've drifted from your own ideal, not society's standard, not your neighbor's, but yours, the better self you glimpse in flashes when you're brave, kind, focused, all honest. History kept close watch on ideals. The ancient Greeks spoke of arete excellence, virtue as the highest calling, not wealth or power, but the fulfillment of your potential. For a soldier, arete was courage in battle. For a statesman, justice in rule. For a potter, beauty in clay. Historians still debate whether this pursuit of arete was egalitarian or reserved for elites, but the thread is clear. Life measured against an ideal, not against convenience, quirky detail. Medieval knights wore surcoats emblazoned with their coat of arms not just for recognition, but as a walking advertisement of their ideals. A lion for courage, a cross for faith, a chevron for protection. Imagine trudging into a muddy battle while your tunic screams, "Be brave" at every arrow. It sounds ridiculous, but it also works. You carried your ideals literally on your chest. Today you do it in subtler ways: a quote taped to your laptop, a playlist you call focus mode, a tattoo that whispers a private vow. Like joke 1. Though, granted, focus playlists sometimes end up being 3 hours of lo-fi beats, and one accidental Justin Bieber remix, which may not be the ideal you were aiming for. Conscience steps in whenever you veer from the map toward that ideal. Some religions cast it as divine voice, others as the echo of evolution teaching cooperation. Either way, you can't quite shake it. Even when you silence it with excuses, it lingers like a faint ringtone under a couch cushion. That's why betrayal of your own standards aches longer than failure against someone else's. You can shrug at disappointing a stranger. You can't shrug at disappointing the person you might have been. Think of your own small betrayals: the homework copied, the text ignored, the promise to yourself you postponed until the calendar side. They don't crush you individually, but together they tilt your trajectory. Like an arrow aimed a degree off, the mist grows larger with distance. That's why conscience whispers early. It knows small drifts become large regrets. Light joke too. It's like the GPS on your phone that politely insists, recalculating. Every time you ignore it, you can keep pretending you know better, but eventually you'll end up in a cornfield wondering where the freeway went. Yet conscience isn't only a scold, it's also a guide toward joy. Think of the times you acted in line with your ideal, helped when it was inconvenient, told the truth when a lie would have been easier. Even if nobody noticed, you felt lighter. That wasn't society clapping. That was your conscience humming in tune with the silhouette on the horizon. There's another quirky note from history. In ancient Egypt, people believed the heart would be weighed against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth, in the afterlife. If your heart was heavy with lies or cruelty, it was devoured. If it balanced, you passed on. It's a dramatic image, but it captures something timeless. You already feel that feather now, in miniature. Each time your heart thuds heavier after a compromised dot. So how do you live with an ideal without being crushed by it? By remembering it is a direction, not a finish line. Nobody hits it perfectly. Not Aristotle. Not Marcus Aurelius. Not you. The ideal is the North Star. It doesn't expect you to arrive, only to navigate. Conscience is the compass needle, twitching nervously, but faithfully toward it. Light joke 3. Of course, your compass needle sometimes feels possessed, spinning, like it just drank 5 espressos, but even then, it's better than wandering blind dot as your eyes droop. Think about tomorrow. The ideal self is already there, faint on the horizon, patient. You don't need to leap across the gulf in one heroic jump. Just notice the needle. One small correction, a kinder word, a task finished instead of postponed, a silence chosen instead of gossip. These are tiny pivots, but they align you with the figures shimmering in the distance. Now breathe deeply. The fan hums. The night is kind. Your conscience has been speaking softly this whole time, not to shame you, but to invite you back to the road. Close your eyes and let that whisper carry. You are not lost. The North Star still shines. And even in sleep, you lean toward it. The air is heavy with drowsiness now, and you feel the weight of philosophy pressing down like a blanket. But philosophy, for all its lofty towers, has a habit of sneaking back into the most ordinary places. That's why tonight the spotlight falls not on stars or saints, but on your messy room. Yes, that pile of clothes in the corner, that desk disguised as a landfill, that coffee mug with an ecosystem evolving inside it. You thought cosmic transformation was grand. Turns out it starts with dust bunnies. There's a kind of cosmic joke here. The very same brain that ponders eternity often refuses to pick up socks. But if aim shapes perception, then the smallest field of battle, your own room, becomes the testing ground for order. You clean it not because it wins you applause, but because it calibrates your compass. You prove, in miniature, that chaos can be negotiated with. History offers proof. In 1947, George Marshall, architect of the post-war recovery plan, once remarked that the rebuilding of Europe had to begin not with speeches, but with literal clearing of rubble, streets shoveled, windows repaired, roofs patched. Historians still argue whether the plan's billions or the citizens' broomsticks did more for morale, but the image stands. Nations heal the way rooms heal, piece by piece. Light joke 1. Though your broomsticks rarely save Europe, they might at least save you from stepping barefoot on Lego, which is arguably its own form of war crime. Quirky example. In Japanese culture, the act of tidying has long carried spiritual overtones. Shinto rituals involve sweeping shrines, not only for cleanliness, but for clearing stagnant energy. Imagine that. Dusting is a metaphysical event. In your room, it might mean moving that stack of an open mail, but the principle is the same. You change the energy by touching the space dot, and psychology nods along. Cognitive behavioral therapy often starts with tangible tasks. Make the bed, set a daily schedule, organize one drawer. These aren't chores. They're signals to the brain that agency exists. If you can command socks into a drawer, maybe you can also command anxiety into a corner. Small victories stack like bricks. Light joke too. And if your bricks happen to be empty pizza boxes, well, perhaps you're halfway to building a fortress anyway. Think about how chaos breeds itself. A messy desk whispers, "Why bother?" every time you pass. A tidy desk whispers, "Maybe just one page more." That whisper grows into momentum, and momentum is how projects, careers, even lives shift. You've seen it. The student who starts with color-coded notes suddenly also applies for scholarships. The friend who finally cleans out the garage suddenly also goes jogging. The dominoes fall, but they start with the tiniest nudge. It's almost embarrassing how much our grand ideals depend on these small acts. You can talk endlessly about destiny, conscience, values, but if your room looks like a crime scene, your brain quietly knows you're bluffing. Order outside steadies order inside. That's why so many monastic traditions require chores: sweeping, gardening, scrubbing floors. The monastery isn't spotless because monks love bleach. It's spotless because their inner compass depends on it. Remember our old acquaintances, the Roman aqueduct workers. Each was assigned a stretch of stone to maintain. Nobody could clear the entire channel alone, but everyone could clear 10 feet. That principle hasn't aged. You don't need to renovate your whole life tonight. Just fold the shirt, rinse the mug, wipe the desk. Your 10 feet of aqueduct keeps the water flowing. Light joke 3. Besides, your room is already whispering at you like a passive-aggressive roommate. Maybe, if you finally took out the trash, we could breathe again. There's even a quirky footnote about Mozart. He composed in messy rooms, quills and papers scattered, candles dripping wax everywhere. Some biographers argue the chaos fueled his genius. Maybe. Or maybe his music was a desperate attempt to drown out the clutter. Either way, you're not Mozart, and your clutter isn't producing symphonies, just stress. So tonight, while the fan hums and your eyes close, let the room become less of a swamp and more of a nest. Tomorrow, when you rise, start with one gesture. Fold, sweep, rinse, sort. Don't wait for the cathedral. Start with the corner. The room will answer back, subtly but surely. You are capable. And when the room breathes easier, so will you. Then, when bigger storms arrive, career upheavals, moral choices, existential dread, you'll already know the choreography. You'll have rehearsed it in socks and shelves. Order doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's built in miniature, rehearsed like scales on a piano. Until one day you can play the symphony. Now let the thought blur. The room around you is imperfect but forgiving. Tomorrow you can tidy one thing. Tonight, you can rest knowing that even greatness begins with dust. You feel the fan smoothing the air above you like a careful hand, and the calm certainty pads into the room. Sooner or later, you have to jump. Not from a rooftop, please keep the windows closed, but into a choice so large it won't let you test drive. First, you want guarantees, coupons, a 30-day return policy on destiny. Instead, you get a quiet sentence that keeps ringing through centuries. Seek the highest good first, and let the lesser things take their places, like shy birds on a wire. You don't get to prove it works and then commit. You commit, and in the committing you find proof. You've practiced small versions already. When you aimed at order yesterday and cleaned your room, remember how your mind exhaled. The socks weren't the point. The point was trust that if you face the right direction, the ground will meet your feet. This chapter just scales that trust up. From drawers to days, from days to a life. The arrow points higher now, past comfort, past applause, toward something that deserves a capital letter, even if you can't quite define it without blushing. There's a phrase for this: leap of faith, popularized by a Danish thinker who paced Copenhagen under grey skies, worrying words into shape like a street dog, worrying a bone. He argued that reason walks you to the cliff's edge, but only faith lets you step where the map goes blank. Historians still argue whether his leap is best read as existential courage, religious submission, or both tangled like headphones in a pocket, but you feel the substance either way. The highest aim can't be reached by hedging. You don't have become brave or half love someone or half tell the truth. Look at the way great ventures began. In July 1969, Apollo 11 descended toward the moon with fuel running thin and alarms chirping like worried birds. The landing computer fussed. Rocks glittered where a soft plane should have been. The crew had trained relentlessly, but the last 100 meters were a decision no rehearsal could own. And then they chose, calmly, the way you turn the final key in a lock. Commit now, adjust as you go. History's a quieter thing than the footage suggests. Most of it is breath and heartbeat and the smallest human voice saying, yes, quirky side. Notes, centuries before rockets, sailors learned to aim by shadows. Navigators used a backstaff to measure the sun without staring into it. They faced away, read the shade, and trusted the math. That's a fine metaphor for days like yours, when staring straight at the highest good feels like blinding yourself. So don't face the tasks that align with it. Read the shade they cast. Tea with your difficult parent. The apology that removes a splinter from your conscience. 1 hour of craft instead of 10 minutes of scrolling. You're still aimed at the sun. You've just learned not to fry your retinas doing it. But let's tell the truth that keeps people on the shore. The leap looks ridiculous from the couch. Seek the highest first sounds like a slogan printed on a smoothie bottle. Your calendar looks like Tetris on hard mode. Your bank account impersonates a shallow puddle. And your inbox breeds overnight like tribbles, light joke one. You think, fine, I'll pursue the capital G good right after I tame this chaos. Except chaos drinks coffee. And by evening it's taller than you again. So flip the order. Seek the highest, then tame the chaos. That's the awkward promise in the old sentence. You orient first, and in the act of orienting, the world begins to sort its priorities for you. It won't do your dishes, sorry, but you'll find which dishes matter. The meeting you can skip, the friendship you must not, the luxury you can release without losing anything you actually need. It feels like cheating, but it's just AIM reorganizing the room. Remember how the desk whispered maybe 1 page more once it was clean. History hands you another parable dressed as an adventure yarn. When Hernan Courts reached the Gulf Coast in 1519, legend says he burned his ships, so retreat was impossible. Scholars still argue whether he actually burned them or merely scuttled them 4 parts, but the imagery stuck because it reveals a mechanism. Sometimes you must remove the exit to find the entrance. Your version won't involve arson, please, but it might mean deleting an app, declining a toxic invitation, or putting money where your mouth is. Classes paid, deposit sent, accountability chosen. When the back door is shut, your feet finally face forward. You've been warned that such devotion will make you weird, and perhaps it will. Kind weird, stubborn weird. The sort that puts groceries on a neighbor's step and refuses to gossip even when the room smells like fresh scandal. It will make you practical, too, in surprising ways. Seek the highest first, and a budget suddenly acquires a spine. Less sugar, more bread. Seek the highest first, and time unclenches. Fewer late-night rabbit holes, more dawns with a pen, or shoes on, or prayer whispered into steam. It turns out the kingdom has a daily planner. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen from the old Nile. People tried absurd lotions because the sun is real. In the same way, you will try odd rituals to keep faith alive. A candle before work, a line of poetry copied by hand, silence on the bus in a world that sells your attention for pennies. Some of these will be silly, some will save you. Light joke too. If your ritual becomes reorganizing your spice rack alphabetically at 2 a.m., that's not faith, that's procrastination cosplaying as piety. Don't misunderstand. Seeking the highest doesn't make you bulletproof. Storms still hit. Nature still shrugs. society still frowns. Malice still sharpens its little knives. Remember our three enemies. Faith sleep doesn't build a roof over you. It builds a keel under you. The rain falls, you stay upright. The keel is made of promises you keep even when nobody texts back, and of work you do even when applause is rationed. It's made, too, of a humor that declines despair's invitation. Light joke 3. Despair are SVPs fashionably early too. Every party it's fine to let it wait on the porch. There's another oddity to mark. When you aim at the highest, your mistakes become tuition. You'll misjudge, overshoot, undershoot. Choose the glittering good rather than the quiet one. The point isn't to become an angel who always discerns perfectly. The point is to become a human who keeps re-aiming. Galileo's telescope didn't make the universe simple. It made it honest. Your aim will not make life easy. It will make your vision less easily fooled. And when the leap terrifies you, borrow courage. People have been doing this longer than you've been breathing. Pilgrims wore scallop shells to say, "We left the tent." Knights stitched lions on their surcoats to remind their chests what to do. Monks swept stone floors, so their souls would learn the sound of order. Ancestors kept wax faces in cabinets to remember who they were for. Your era gives you different props: a lock screen verse, a charity receipt, a calendar block that simply reads, "The work." They are not magic, they are anchors. So lie back. Feel the mattress receive your weight without argument. Let the fan trace cool karmas across your skin. Whisper the simplest contract you can keep. First things first, the highest aim first, the rest after. Tomorrow, you won't solve history. You will send one message that matters. Make one choice that honors your better self. Sit for 10 minutes with the silence that scares you most and discover it is not a wolf, but a doorway. You can't prove the leap before you leap. You can only notice that everyone who mattered to you, teachers, elders, the friend who told you the truth when it stung, lived as if the leap was sound. And from the far side of their choices, they waved you on. Close your eyes, step where the map fades, trust the keel, let sleep be your practice. Fall, safe and slow, and wake ready to give your weight to what deserves it most. The night has turned into that slow syrupy quiet where the world outside your window could be paused, yet inside your mind the reels of stories keep playing. And you realize cultures never stopped whispering the same lesson in different costumes. Fairy tales, fables, cartoons with wooden boys and fiddling insects, they all hum the same background song. Aim high, or stay a puppet. Plan wisely, or starve in winter. You thought they were just bedtime tales for children. Turns out, they were bedtime tales for you too. Now, in your bed with the fan muttering and your eyelids folding, Pinocchio might be the clearest mirror. At first he is a wooden marionette, jerked by strings, whining, lying, sneaking off to pleasure island where boys turn into donkeys. You remember watching it once and laughing, but also squirming, because being pulled by strings is just the visible version of how you live when you dodge responsibility. A wooden boy has no spine, literally or metaphorically. Only when Pinocchio decides to rescue his father, to descend into the whale's gut, does he start turning real. Historians still argue whether the story is primarily about obedience, morality, or simply Italian anxieties about mischievous children, but the effect on you is obvious. Responsibility transforms puppets into people. Light joke 1, though technically, a real boy still whines, lies, and sneaks off sometimes, but at least he doesn't splinter when he trips. And then there are the ants and the grasshopper, or in some tellings, the cricket and the fiddler. The moral is clear: work when the sun is out, or freeze when it's gone. Ants, with their steady, boring industry, survive. The fiddler, with his carefree improvisation, starves. You groaned at this story as a child, thinking it was invented just to ruin summer fun, but now you notice the deeper layer. It isn't about abolishing joy. It's about prioritizing. Music is beautiful, but only after you've stored the grain. Culture doesn't ask you to smother play, only to tether it to responsibility. A quirky fact: in medieval bestiaries, ants were described as creatures that had no king but still managed perfect order. Monks used the image to preach self-discipline. See, even insects managed to coordinate without royal commands. Imagine medieval scribes pointing to an anthill as a political lesson. If ants can stay organized without a throne, what's your excuse? Your conscience chuckles, but the lesson sneaks in. Collective order grows from personal discipline. Your mind drifts to other tales. 2. Cinderella, who survives humiliation by orienting herself toward grace rather than bitterness. Hercules, who chooses the harder road of virtue over the easy road of vice. Even superheroes in modern comics retell the same script. Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. These stories aren't random, they are software updates for the human soul, nudging you toward the same download every century. Light joke too, though some modern updates glitch, like that one movie where the hero spends half the time brooding in spandex, hardly inspiring. But hey, at least the cape looks good in the wind. Think back to your own small fables, the lessons your life already offered. The time you ignored the ant inside you and ended up scrambling last minute, feeling the icy breath of winter on your deadline. The time you followed the cricket and found yourself broke, tired, and humming the wrong tune, or the opposite. The time you worked steadily, boringly, and later discovered the feast of relief it brought you. Your stories fold into the same tradition. Responsibility first, joy second, or else joy evaporates into shame. Another cultural thread. In many African folktales, the trickster figure Anansi the spider, for instance, wins short-term gains through cleverness, but often exposes himself to humiliation. These tales warn that brilliance without responsibility tangles you in your own web. You don't need to be a scholar to grasp the parallel. You've outsmarted obligations before, only to find yourself cornered by them later. Cleverness doesn't save you. Aiming high does. Light joke 3. Besides, spiders in your house aren't plotting fables, they're just redecorating with cobwebs. But still, remember Anansi when you're tempted to be slick instead of steady. What strikes you, lying here with your eyes heavier, is that humanity kept dressing this truth in costumes precisely because we kept forgetting it. We need to be told, again and again, the puppet becomes real by carrying weight. The fiddler starves if he fiddles too long. The ant survives not by brilliance, but by persistence. Culture is the lullaby that keeps you from drifting into apathy. So what do you do tomorrow, in your less mythic, but no less demanding life? You can play your fiddle, yes, joy matters, laughter matters, but first you do your ant work. You pick the task, send the message, pay the bill, sweep the floor. You rescue your metaphorical father from the whale. Maybe that means calling your actual dad, or maybe it means saving the part of you that still wants to be decent. Each act turns strings into SINEW. Now breathe out. You are not wooden. You are not starving. You are someone with stories folded into your bloodstream, stories that wink at you across centuries. Pinocchio, the ants, the fiddlers they've been, sitting at your bedside the whole time, whispering that the highest aim is not abstract but embodied. It starts in chores and choices, in persistence and honesty. Let the fan carry you. Let the bed cradle you like a soft anthill. Tomorrow the world will tug at your strings, tempt you with fiddle tunes. But tonight you remember, you can cut the strings, pick up the grain, dive into the whale. That's how you stay alive. That's how you turn real. The night has grown almost liquid, slow and deep, and you feel your body carried as if on some dark river. This is the hour to talk about suffering, not to scare you out of sleep, but to show why discipline and pain are not villains to be exiled, but tutors that sit stubbornly at your desk until you listen. You've been told all your life to avoid hurt, dodge discomfort, chase the shortcut. But the paradox is this: suffering accepted voluntarily is the seed of growth, suffering denied or avoided simply compounds like unpaid interest. Think back. The seasons that changed you most were not padded with comfort. They were the winters when you carried weight, sometimes literally, sometimes in silence. You remember the heartbreak that made you reorder your values, the illness that taught you the value of mornings, the work project that buried you in stress, but left you sharper, more confident when you climbed out. That wasn't meaningless, it was tuition. The bill for growth is always written in strain. History speaks the same language. Consider the Spartan training grounds, where boys were deliberately underfed so they would learn cunning and resilience. It sounds cruel, and historians still argue whether Sparta was admirable or abusive, but nobody denies the effect. Citizens forged to endure. You wouldn't want their exact recipe for your lifelike joke one. Your fridge is already dangerous enough without adding mandatory starvation to the grocery list, but the principle remains. Struggle shapes strength, a quirky detail. Michelangelo describes sculpting as freeing the figure trapped in the marble. He chipped away relentlessly, hour after hour, in cold studios that ruined his health, to reveal David standing inside stone. The chisel blows were violence against rock, but out of them came a figure so alive that 5 centuries later, tourists still gasp at the veins in marble arms. Your own life works similarly. Discipline and suffering chip at the chaos, until your better self emerges not smooth, not painless, but undeniably more real. You know how temptation works. When pain shows up, you reach for numbness, scrolling endlessly, sweets devoured absent-mindedly, another hour hiding under blankets. And sometimes that's fine, rest is real. Sweetness matters, but overdone, it becomes rot. Avoided pain metastasizes, confronted pain transforms. Light joke too, which is why eating one cookie is comfort. Eating the whole sleeve is archaeology. You're digging for answers at the bottom of the plastic tray to have a look at your own small victories. Every time you've shouldered discomfort, willingly studied, when you wanted sleep, apologized when you wanted to hide, endured the awkward silence after telling the truth, you came out with more backbone. And though nobody hangs medals for these tiny wars, they matter. They accumulate like layers in wood grain, invisible to casual eyes, but strengthening you against storms. There's another angle. Discipline as the scaffolding for freedom. Musicians practice scales until their fingers ache, not because they love pain, but because only then can they improvise beautifully. Athletes sweat through drills, because only then can they move with grace under pressure. Historians note that Bach, despite his divine compositions, was a ferocious taskmaster for himself, writing music daily like a craftsman punching a clock. Freedom is born inside limits, like a kite soaring, because it is tethered. And so suffering and discipline are companions, not enemies. Suffering arrives whether you invite it or not. Illness, rejection, accidents. Discipline is how you pre-negotiate with suffering, how you condition yourself so that when it barges in, you have muscles ready. A soldier doesn't drill for sunny days. A soldier drills for storms. Like joke 3, which means dragging yourself to the gym Monday morning is less about ABS and more about apocalypse preparedness. You may never need to outrun zombies, but at least you'll look sturdy trying. Quirky marginal note. Buddhist monks practiced walking meditation by pacing slowly 4 hours, feeling every step until their legs burned, not for masochism, but to embody patience. The pain itself was the lesson. Life is hard, but step by step, breath by breath, you continue. You might not spend hours in robes tomorrow, but the principle translates. Some aches are classrooms. And what about meaning? Here's the twist. Suffering without meaning crushes. Suffering with meaning transforms. Think of childbirth, of marathon training, of caregiving. The pain doesn't vanish, but it is reframed. You know why you endure, and that why is heavier than the weight itself. Viktor Frankl, surviving camps of unspeakable cruelty, wrote that those who found meaning, whether in love, faith, or work yet to be finished, stood straighter than those who despaired. Pain is inevitable. Its interpretation is optional. As you sink deeper into this night, Notice your own burdens, which are crushing because they are senseless, which could become bearable if you pin them to a reason higher than comfort. Tomorrow's work, tomorrow's chores, tomorrow's awkward conversations attach them to an ideal, and they stop being random punishment. They become chisels carving marble dots. So breathe. You are not avoiding suffering. You are choosing how to suffer. You can suffer by shrinking, numbing, avoiding, or suffer by lifting, building, risking. One depletes, the other creates. One drags you toward despair, the other sculpts you toward strength. The fan hums like a soft saw across wood. The blanket weighs just enough to remind you of gravity's quiet insistence. Let these be metaphors, the small, constant pressures that, when accepted, turn you from raw material into a finished form. Tomorrow, let your discipline bear a little weight voluntarily, so that when suffering barges in uninvited, you're already acquainted. Now let go. Close your eyes. Trust the night to carry what you can't, for now. You'll pick it back up. In the morning, steadier, stronger, sculpted one layer deeper by the chisels of strain. The fan is still humming like a loyal metronome, and by now your body feels as though it has melted a little deeper into the mattress. This is the moment to pull all the threads together, the missed targets, the whales, the ants, the leap sand, tie them in one knot that will hold through sleep. Because here's the last truth, you are already betting your life. Every morning you wake up and put your chips on the table, on comfort, on ambition, on apathy, on love. There is no option of not wagering. The only question is whether your bet is worthy of the chaos you must endure. Chaos has never been shy. It arrives in headlines, in illnesses, in traffic jams, in the small absurdities of bureaucracy. The universe offers entropy for free, and yet, across history, people have kept daring to place their lives on something higher. Joan of Arc, hearing voices, marched into war. Darwin, seasick and unsure, voyaged on the Beagle. Even the anonymous farmer who saves seed grain in a famine was making a wager that tomorrow deserved the sacrifice of today. Historians still argue whether each of these gambles was wise, reckless, or divinely inspired. What cannot be argued is that each staked existence itself on a meaning bigger than survival, a quirky story to tuck in your pocket. The Norse told of Yggdrasil, the world tree whose branches held the cosmos, but in their myth, the tree was constantly being gnawed by a dragon at its roots. The gods didn't imagine a perfect, untouched order. They imagined order as something that must be maintained despite decay. That's your life too. Whatever you build, chaos will nibble. That doesn't mean building is pointless. It means building is holy. Like joke one. And honestly, if your IKEA bookshelf lasts more than 2 moves before chaos wins, you deserve Suntwood. So why place your bet on meaning higher than despair? Because despair is the default setting, the slot machine that eats coins and gives nothing back. Meaning, on the other hand, doesn't erase suffering, but it redeems it. It turns chaos into story, turns pain into tuition, turns boredom into preparation. If you're going to wager anyway, you may as well wager on the option that transforms rather than drains. Think of the earlier chapters: the archer aiming, the sailor steering, the monk sweeping stone floors. None of them were promised success. The archer might miss, the sailor might sink, the monk might cough in the dust. But each lived as though their aim mattered, their voyage mattered, their broomstroke mattered. And in that living, the chaos became less frightening, because it had been assigned to a task larger than fear. Light joke too. Chaos still wins occasionally, like when your cat knocks over a full glass of water directly onto your laptop, but even then, you're reminded that material possessions are just expensive excuses for new beginnings. So what does staking your life on meaning for you tomorrow? It won't be cinematic. It will be embarrassingly ordinary. Answering the message instead of ghosting, finishing the page instead of scrolling, telling the truth when lying would be quicker, choosing discipline instead of indulgence when the difference matters. These are the wagers you make with your hours, and together they are the bet of a lifetime. The Where this goal is the one that allows you to look back even in exhaustion, even in grief and say, at least my suffering wasn't wasted. At least it built something. That might be art. It might be family. It might be service. It might be the stubborn act of staying kind when bitterness would have been easier. Whatever it is, it redeems the wager. Like joke 3. Just don't wager your entire life on collecting Funko Pops. Unless, of course, your destiny truly is to become the dragon guarding them, then at least own it with style. The night holds you still. Your eyelids are heavier than all the philosophy we've carried together, but in that heaviness is peace. You've heard enough to trust the principle. You are betting anyway. You may as well bet on the goal that redeems the chaos. You may as well bet on becoming real, steady, generous, strong. Now the blanket becomes your witness, the fang your chorus, the dark your contract. Sleep is not an escape, but a rehearsal, a daily surrender to meaning larger than your control. Breathe in, exhale, and feel how even here, in silence, the wager continues, life placed on the side of growth. And now, slow everything down. The night is no longer a road, but a harbor. You've walked through missed aims, burdens, whales, fiddlers, and even IKEA furniture, and all of it was only so you could rest in this last lull. Because bedtime stories aren't really about falling asleep, they're about letting the heart unclench enough to welcome tomorrow. Let sentences lengthen, like waves rolling toward a shore. Let images soften. Picture your room tidied by the smallest acts of care, your conscience gently pointing north, your leap into the unknown cushioned by faith. You've looked into the abyss, rescued what was lost, and carried it back. You've seen how discipline makes suffering tolerable, how culture hides its lessons in stories of ants and wooden boys. And in every turn, one theme kept circling back. Meaning is heavier than chaos. That is why it holds dot. So let go of the strain in your chest. Let your shoulders sink into the mattress. Imagine the wax faces of ancestors smiling faintly from their cabinet, not with judgment, but with recognition. They endured their wagers. Now you endure yours. You don't have to win tonight. You don't have to prove yourself. You only have to rest so that tomorrow lift again. Outside, maybe a tram rumbles, maybe a siren wails, maybe silence reigns in. It doesn't matter, you're already floating inward. The story is done, the wager is made, meaning waits on the other side. Of dreams, patient, steady, kind, good night, sleep well, sweet dreams.